Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. I'm really thrilled to be able to welcome you to our Reimagining Citizenship in South Asia conference. This conference is curated by the Reimagining Citizenship Research Consortium based at the Department of Politics in the University of York and the South Asia Specialist Group of the UK Political Studies Association, also called the PSA. I'm Indrajit Roy, a senior lecturer in global development politics at the University of York, and I am privileged to convene the Reimagining Citizenship Research Consortium, which aims to chronicle the emergent contentions over citizenship in India in the wake of the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act, the CAA. Our work draws a great deal on humanities and arts research, in addition to social sciences, of course. And the consortium is a collaboration with public intellectuals, filmmakers, academics, activists, and poets. It is supported by the Arts and Humanities Research Council of the UK. Co-investigators in this consortium include Harsh Mander, who's at the Center for Equity Studies, Natasha Badwar at Aman Biradri, Mujibur Rahman at the Jamia Millia Islamia, K. Ravi Raman of the Kerala State Planning Board, Mohsin Alam of the Jindal School of Government, of course, Buddhadev Haldar, who's with us at the University of York, and Abdul Kalam Azad, a poet and a doctoral student at Virje University in Amsterdam, as well as a team of researchers using digital ethnographies, emotional testimonies, and transformative storytelling. You will be meeting some or all of them today through the course of the day. Over the last 1 year, since the consortium was formed, we have been privileged to learn from the work of many colleagues. We realized that contestations over citizenship are hardly unique to India and, in fact, dotted the landscape of her neighbors in South Asia. Almost 75 years since the different countries of the region achieved their independence from Britain, the quest for full citizenship remains illusory for several members of our populations. Sometimes this has led observers to wonder whether such a quest is necessarily futile. Is citizenship as a status bestowed by states necessarily Eurocentric? Is it perhaps not suited to the political culture of the South Asian subcontinent? Now, of course, understandings of citizenship beyond the Marshallian notions of status bestowed by states suggest that this is not so. Of course, Hannah Arendt reminded us long ago that citizenship was about the right to have rights, irrespective of where you were. More recently, Engin Aysen has suggested in writing about citizenship after Orientalism that citizenship is about political subjectivities, about belonging, about presence. Neeraja Jayal urges us to consider the travails and discontents of citizenship, even as the idea retains appeal. And Sumi Madhok, in her just published and long-awaited work, excavates the vernacular cultures of rights in South Asia that generate claims of citizenship. These observations compel us to think not in terms of whether citizenship as a concept applies to South Asian political contexts, but the meanings, understandings, and practices that in fact constitute imaginations of citizenship in the region. Indeed, notions of rights, presence, and belonging, and membership in the political community are being interrogated across the region. As the 1.5 billion people of South Asia negotiate their states, societies, and territories in a quest for better lives, they imbue citizenship with meanings that extend far beyond the Marshallian conception as a status bestowed by governments upon populations. With recent scholars who emphasize the emotions that underpin citizenship, the passions that imbue citizenship with meaning, and here I'm thinking of concepts of affective citizenship proposed by Anne-Marie Fortier, South Asians remind us, as always, of that cheeky adage, it is effective because it's affective. Over the last year since the consortium was formed, we have been privileged to expand our network. deepening our understanding of citizenship quandaries across South Asia. We've been helped by Rudabe Shahid, who was with us at York till last month and is now at New College, Florida. And of course, we've learned a great deal from colleagues at the South Asia Specialist Group of the UK Political Studies Association. And we are incredibly thrilled to be co-convening this event with them both. Over the next few hours, we will hear from colleagues about the imaginations of citizenship in this geopolitically explosive, economically precarious, and ecologically fragile region. We have 4 panels exploring themes of domination, belonging, territories, and borders in relation to reimagining citizenship in South Asia. A special panel on citizenship conundrum in Afghanistan will be held later today from 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. British Standard Time, at which we will hear from experts on the unfolding situation there. We are also privileged to have Professor Faisal Devji deliver the keynote address. That will be from 1:30 to 2 p.m. British time. Okay, after that formal welcome, we are coming up to our first session, which should have, if all had gone well, started 15 minutes earlier. But you know how these things are with technology. So this is our first session, themed domination. Will start in a minute. And to those who are joining us now, I'm thrilled to welcome you to this first session of our Reimagining Citizenship in the South Asia Conference today. And we have a fantastic lineup of speakers from Australia, from India, and I think we have from Australia and India because the speaker from England had to drop out. So we've had one drop out. Thank you so much for joining us, Stuti and Zahid, Sheetal and Devanjan. We've requested speakers to make their interventions in about 8 to 10 minutes. The format is to have all presentations one after the other, followed by comments and questions. To chair this first session, we have with us Dr. Harsh Mander, one of India's most trusted and respected human rights and peace worker, writer, columnist, researcher, and teacher who works with survivors of mass violence, hunger, homeless persons, and street children. Harsh recently organized a campaign of continuing journeys of solidarity and conscience to families affected by hate violence across India, called the Karwan-e-Mohabbat, or Caravan of Love. Harsh is a prolific writer who has chronicled the struggles of citizenship in India over the last 2 decades. Harsh is one of the co-investigators on this Reimagining Citizenship Consortium. So we are, of course, very privileged with that. I would now request Harsh to take over the proceedings, please. Harsh, over to you.
Thank you so much, Indrajit. I hope my voice is loud and clear. Yeah, okay. So friends, it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm sitting today in yet another part of the world. I'm in Berlin. I've just started the Return One Bicycle Fellowship, and I'll spend a few months looking at questions of how society counter inherited legacies of hate and targeted violence and domination. I won't say very much. We want to hear the speakers, but I did think I'd just start with a small, memory of something that, a video that came into our Twitter feed yesterday. It was totally horrifying. There was police paramilitary forces forcefully, displacing about 800 people, mostly of Bengali Muslim identity, in Assam. And they had asked just for a little more time so that they could retrieve their materials, look at some kind of rehabilitation, but they were forcefully bulldozed. And the chief minister announced that he wanted to replace them with indigenous people doing collective cultivation. So it's really, and in this video, one man comes to defend his home with one stick in his hand, and he's shot in the chest. He falls, and somebody, a civilian who's accompanying them, who turns out to be a photographer, official photographer with the district magistrate's office, jumps, leaps on the unconscious or dead body of this man, 2 or 3 times, desecrating it. Underlining, I think, many things, but most of all, what the politics of hate and domination have done to us as a people. And I think that's sort of just what I wanted us to think about as we start this session. We have a very fine set of speakers. I'm always sort of unhappy to be the chair because there's a lot you want to say, and there'll have to be another occasion. But I think that it's wonderful for us to have the opportunity to hear from our colleagues from around the world. Really, we start the panel with Stuti Bhatnagar from the University of New South Wales in Australia, and Zahid Shahab Ahmed, Alfred Deakin Institute for Citizenship and Globalization in the Deakin University in Australia. We will hear from them a critical discourse and analysis of the Hindu nationalist citizenship narrative in India. Over to you all. We'll need to stay with time because we started 15 minutes late. A request that you please take 10 minutes for each presentation. Both of you have 10 minutes between yourselves, but there will be a question and answer session where when we can, hear a little more from you. For participants, you're requested to please put in your question into the chat box. So over to you, Stuti and Zahid.
Thank you, Dr. Mander. And it seems Zahid is having some internet issues, so he should be back as soon as he can. So I can start and then he can join us whenever he can. And I must say, following you as a chairperson of this panel, it's going to be a tough act to follow considering your experience on these issues. So let's hope we can do justice to that. So just want to, again, technology. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
All right, so our presentation is essentially based on a critical discourse analysis of the Hindu nationalist citizenship narrative. And what we're essentially trying to do here is to look at the Ghar Wapsi program in particular, as well as the Citizenship Amendment Act, and try and see what are some of the kind of recurring ideas that exist there. In addition, also to look at the various organizations that are involved in these campaigns, Hindu nationalist organizations that are involved, and again, how they are connected to each other and kind of perpetuating these narratives in Indian society, particularly since 2014. So I'm sure everyone here knows the BJP's victory in 2014 Lok Sabha elections was kind of a pivotal moment for Indian politics for a lot of reasons. More than anything else, I think it has brought in a majoritarian political mindset, and it has given a platform to a lot of violence against minorities as well. But to kind of sum up what they have done is to create a discourse that, like you said, works, perpetuates hate and distrust in Indian society and raises a lot of questions about the identity of the people in India, particularly the religious minorities, as well as raises questions about how the Indian society is going to look like, as well as what are its kind of political dynamics as well. And we will focus on the violence against religious minorities as well, particularly with regards to the Ghar Wapsi and the Citizenship Amendment Act, but later in the presentation, because I think we see a lot of intersection, but particularly for the BJP's politics. Domestic politics also has a lot of impact on its foreign policy, particularly in South Asia. So later in the presentation, Zahid will talk a little bit about the reactions to these initiatives in the South Asian region, particularly in Pakistan and in Bangladesh. And so, very generally speaking, there is this narrative of Hindu victimhood that has been perpetuated by the BJP government since 2014, and a number of programs have been instituted to feed into that. So, and the BJP's rise at the political level has also sort of brought to the mainstream a lot of the Hindu nationalist groups, which earlier worked more like social sort of organizations. And I can see that Zahid is back, so if he wants to continue.
Okay, thank you very much. My apologies that my internet became very unreliable. Today is the day with all the technical glitches. But like I think Stuti has already introduced what we were meant to do in this paper or project that we are working on, but especially with reference to, I think, Hindu nationalists and how they view Modi as a role model is, I think, is an important component, because in our critical discourse analysis of right-wing Hindu nationalist groups, this is one of the themes that came up quite significantly, and how especially from RSS and how the youth within the group sees Modi as a role model. That's an important component. And a sudden rise in visibility of Hindu nationalists through Sangh Parivar and violent extremism also can be credited to the confidence that the right-wing religious groups or Hindu groups have received since the BJP's or Modi's first success in the 2014 elections. And then in The Economist, this report came, and it was reported that the RSS's nearly 5 million volunteers were lifted by the Modi's success because the new premier was the group's long-term preacher or Parcharak. So not to forget, Sangh Parivar was the backbone of Modi's election campaign. And since then, we have seen this, emergence of so many different campaigns, not just Ghar Wapsi. And we know, Stuti is going to talk about in further details about its implications and the kind of discourse, the data that we have collected and analyzed. But overall, how there have been other campaigns and impacts on, non-Hindus, you can say, under the guise of cow politics or through the campaigns like Ghar Wapsi that have mainly targeted Indian Muslims. So with this, I'll pass on to Stuti to talk about some of the discourse analysis that we have carried out. But of course, I think these campaigns under cow protection or love jihad or Ghar Wapsi, they all have similar kind of objectives behind them. There are political objectives and social or ideological objectives. And I think our discourse analysis to a degree is going to show those components in more detail. So I'll just pass on back to Stuti, and then I'll come back with my analysis of the reactions from Pakistan and Bangladesh.
So the Ghar Wapsi program is essentially driven by the Vishwa Hindu Parishad that sought the conversion of Muslims and Christians to Hinduism. And it is a sort of a purification movement that initially began in the 1920s and was advocated by early ideologues, including Savarkar and Golwalkar. And the idea has since been adopted by the RSS with the formation of specialized outfits called the Dharm Jagran Manch, the Hindu Jagran Samiti. And to carry out these reconversion ceremonies, There are a whole host of organizations that are involved in this campaign. Some of them are on the screen there as well, which include mainstream Hindu nationalist groups like the RSS, the Bajrang Dal, and the VHP, but also particular associations that have been created for this project. So there's an All India Tribal Welfare Council, which is again an offshoot of the RSS. There's a Dharm Jagran Samanvay Vibhag. The Bajrang Dal, which is the youth wing of the VHP, is also involved in this, as is the Hindu Yuva Vahini, which was set up by the current Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath. And all of these organizations are connected with the RSS and with the ruling BJP as well, and they have been associated with other Hindu nationalist projects as well, whether it is Gauraksha or the Love Jihad campaign. Now, the basic argument of the Ghar Wapsi campaign is that since most Muslims and Christians in India were originally Hindus and were converted either fraudulently or through intimidation, converting them back to the Hindu religion is not conversion, but simply a return to the fold. So the program is also driven by anxieties of Hindus of being lured by Abrahamic missionaries. It feeds into the Hindu nationalist narrative of Hindu victimhood, which argues that the past millennia has seen India's Hindu majority community victimized by the Muslim minority, that Hindu population is decreasing relative to Muslim population in India, and which would lead to an eventual Islamization of Indian society. Now, so fundamental to this program, therefore, is a definitional question of who is actually a Hindu and how that identity has evolved. And so as defined by Savarkar on the screen again, he defines a Hindu as someone who can have a paternal descent, common blood, or has a common civilization. And I'm sure everyone here is aware of how influential Savarkar's ideas have been to the Hindu nationalist groups all across the board. M.S. Golwalkar, who was the second chief of the RSS, has also developed these ideas further. So according to him, the failure to assimilate the Muslims into the national society was a major blunder by the leaders of the National Liberation Movement, particularly the Congress Party. And they believe that by giving concessions to Muslims at the cost of the majority, they could win them over. The Sangh has been very critical of the Congress Party's appeasement of minorities. That has been a running theme throughout their politics as well. And for Golwalkar, in terms of identity, for him, the foreign races in Hindustan have to adopt to the Hindu culture and the language. They have to respect the Hindu religion. They have to and must not entertain any ideas of that go against the glorification of the Hindu race and culture. And they need to be subordinated to the Hindu nation. Now, several of these ideas, including the ones on the screen, have fed directly into future Hindu nationalist discourse that argues for a revival of Hindu civilizational strength, while also critical of secular or alternative conceptions of India's identity and by extension, the identity of its citizens. Now, based on our discourse analysis, you can see that there is an emphasis on India's identity as a Hindu Rashtra or a Hindu nation, as reiterated very strongly most recently by the current RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat. And Bhagwat's statement was endorsed by other Hindu nationalist groups, and it simultaneously empowered them and propagated this narrative further. The second broad idea is that the dwindling Hindu population in India and the need to curtail the demographic growth of the minorities, particularly targeting the Muslims, is also a big idea here. There's also a narrative of Hindu victimhood which is created to point to the dangers of an increasing Muslim population, which would mean an environment which is unsafe for Hindu women. It would lead to the destruction of Hindu religious sites. There would be a lack of jobs because there is minority appeasement and so on. Both the VHP and the BJP have called for constitutional amendments that make conversions illegal, particularly focused on conversions to Islam and Christianity. And Ghar Wapsi is the way it is framed is because it is framed as a reconversion, it would not come under the ambit of these laws. And several state governments do have enacted anti-conversion laws, and many of these groups have violently disrupted minority religious gathering on charges that they are mass conversion ceremonies and they need to be banned. Now, another thing to note here is that a large number of religious conversions in India are also owing to the discriminatory caste system. And this is something that the Sangh Parivar realizes as well. So a big part of the discussion almost always includes this Meenakshi-puram conversion incident from 1981, when more than 1,000 Dalits in a Tamil Nadu village converted to Islam as a means to escape oppression from the landed caste. And in response, Tamil Nadu enacted an anti-conversion law, which was later repealed. And the Meenakshi-puram conversions are often referenced in the literature as well. And so another thing that I found was the secretary of the BJP scheduled caste cell, Sanjay Paswan, has also admitted that it is because poor Muslims and Christians who converted from Hinduism because they wanted benefits of reservation and they were struggling with the caste system, and hence they should be brought back. So Ghar Wapsi for the Hindu nationalists is therefore offered very strategically. A different narrative is used for the Dalit population with economic incentives such as the scheduled caste certificates, Aadhaar cards, etc. offered. Hindu nationalists also ironically appropriate Gandhi and Ambedkar's message against the caste system to appeal to the Dalits. At the public level, the RSS has also made statements against the caste system, even though it remains a largely upper caste grouping. The VHP has also talked about the need to modernize and reshape Hindu Dharma.
Sorry to interrupt, we're really running out of time. So you'll need to wind up because we've gone way beyond 10 minutes.
I thought we had 10 minutes each.
Telling us, but,
I thought we had 10 minutes each, sorry.
Pardon me? Sorry?
I thought both of us had 10 minutes each.
I wish that was the case. No.
Okay, that's all right. Just kidding. All right. So, and another target for the Hindu nationalists or this Ghar Wapsi program is the tribal population as well, which is again offered economic incentives. So I'll just quickly come to the Citizenship Amendment Act then. So Ghar Wapsi is also tied with the BJP or the Hindu nationalist idea that India is a Hindu nation, and it also extends to other countries in South Asia and beyond where a substantial Hindu population lives. And there's this idea that the partition wronged the Hindu people and that India has been under 1200 years of servitude and so on. So the Citizenship Amendment Act, again, I don't think in this audience I need to talk about what it is, but essentially what it is doing is singling out the Muslim population in India, creating a new kind of citizenship category, especially against Muslim migrants to India, talking about new documentation and kind of new ideas around citizenship too. And it also obviously also has ramifications beyond India to other South Asian nations. So I'll pass on to Zahid very quickly, who can bring that in and then conclude for us.
Yeah, benefiting from Mr. Chair's generosity, if I could take just 60 more seconds to quickly sum it up. I think the examples are there on the screen already and how it has impacted the discourse in Pakistan. We are talking about actually one populist leader against the other. So Imran Khan is a populist leader as well. So he has basically used the very different kind of language, which wasn't the case when Vajpayee was the prime minister and we had Nawaz Sharif on the other hand, prime minister. So the language clearly shows that, you know, the feelings have been intensified, and using language like that Modi government is inspired by Nazi ideology or it's a fascist regime. These are commonly used now phrases, not just by the prime minister, but also the foreign ministry of Pakistan as well. And we have seen in recent years that the incidents of violence against Hindus They are increasing in Pakistan and also on Hindu temples and so on. Stuti, if you could quickly move on to Bangladesh. So similarly, the situation in Bangladesh is also very similar, although historically, the Awami League has been leaned towards India. They have had very good relationship, but we have seen that recently there have been hiccups, mainly because of these citizenship changes in India, and also there have been attacks on Bangladeshi Hindus as well in Bangladesh, and those incidents have also been increasing. So just to sum up, like very quickly, because I promised that I'll wrap it up in 60 seconds. So moving to the conclusion quickly, Stuti, if you could move to the final slide. Okay, it seems okay, so thank you very much. So in terms of the discourse analysis, we have found some certain key features within the discourse coming from Sangh Paribars, discourse linked to the citizenship debates. So there's key component in relation to reviving Hindus' golden past, and also basically rubbishing the two-nation theory or the partition of the Indian subcontinent. And the narrative also blames the Indian Congress and Gandhi for being pro-Muslim and for undermining India's Hindu heritage. And also, the narrative, of course, strongly focuses on the promotion of Hindutva and Hindu domination. And finally, there were a lot of examples in our discourse that we couldn't share, but, especially within the Sangh Parivar, there are differences. There's Shiv Sena specifically targets Muslims. So even with reference to Ghar Wapsi, few of their leaders say that converting Muslims to Hinduism is not enough, because we do not want those genetic abnormalities to come into Hindus. So for example, so there's a lot of dehumanization of Muslims there as well. And, and the final 3 points, I think we have talked already in greater details, but I think the final point is very important, that these citizenship changes in India has also affected India's relationship with its two Muslim majority nations, with Bangladesh and Pakistan. And also going forward, if they really move ahead with their detention centers plan, and finally the plan to deport those whatever they label them as illegal citizens to the neighboring countries, then it can have greater implications for regional security in South Asia. Thank you very much. My apologies again for taking longer than the allocated time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zahid and Stuti. I know it's hard to summarize an issue so important and so complex. We learned a lot, and I wish we had more time. But I think, in the small amount of time we'll have for question and answers, we will certainly come back to you. We were to follow this with a discussion by Rajesh Venugopal from LSE on ethnic domination in Sri Lanka. He's unfortunately not well. So Indrajit has kindly agreed to come in, make a few brief points, because we're running very short of time, on India as the world's largest democracy, converting fast into an ethnocracy. Indrajit, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Harsh. And in some ways, I have to say it was, my placement coming after the presentation that Zahid and Stuti have made is I don't want to use the word fortunate, but it just allows me to make those connections very explicit. You've actually presented a lot of the stuff that informs the argument I would like to make. Which is that India is transitioning from the world's largest democracy, however imperfect it might have been, into what you might call an ethnocracy, and a specifically Hindu ethnocracy. An ethnocracy in which dominant ethnos or people gain political control and use the state apparatus to ethnicize the territory and society in question. This is a paper that a version of it has appeared on the website, the India Forum, and I'm still developing those ideas and playing with the ways in which democracy and ethnocracy might sort of be entangled. This follows the ideas of ethnic democracy that have been used sometimes to describe India, but of course, one has to be sort of clear, the ways in which ethnocracies and democracies are in fact quite distinct. So in the paper, I introduce the concept of ethnocracy and outline its key distinguishing features. In the second section of the paper, I illustrate India's transition to an ethnocracy by documenting key political and policy practices of Modi's rule over the last 7 years. And the third section of the paper offers glimpses into possible trajectories of democracy in India. Now, here I will only outline a definition of ethnocracy and then its implications for democracy, and why perhaps we need to think of political languages beyond what we have been thinking of along Hindu nationalism or religious nationalism. The second section about the key political and policy practices of Modi's rule have been very well covered by the presentation that came just before us, so that makes things easier. Now, how might we define an ethnocracy? The term comes to us from the development sociologist Oran Yifteshel as the specific expression of nationalism where a dominant ethnos gains political control and uses the state apparatus to ethnicize the territory and society in question. Citizenship is unequal and rests on laws that enable the capture of the state by one ethnic group. And ethnocratic states, for example, we have cases of Israel, the case of Sri Lanka, which Rajesh would have presented had he been with us, and Malaysia. They frame policies that rigidify distinctions between a social group that is considered to be the core of the nation and groups that are considered peripheral or external to the nation. Three further features distinguish ethnocracies from other regimes. One, a contest between a dominant ethnos and minority groups over territorial space and the public realm. Second, a rigid ethno-nationalism. And third, long-term political and economic stratification between ethnic groups. Now, in regard to the first, considering a social group to be the core of the nation and distinguishing them from groups that are considered, external or peripheral, we've already heard the ways in which Hindus are being established as the core group of the Indian nation, and religious minorities are either peripheral to the nation at best, or at worst, they are posed as threats. And one can just look up the website of the RSS, for instance, from which the BJP publicly draws inspiration to see how Hindus are established as the core group. So I won't go into that in any more detail. There is the element of the territorial dimension of India's emerging ethnocracy. And here you have conflicts over pieces of land and over entire tracts of provinces. What we saw in Jammu and Kashmir, what we see even more recently in Lakshadweep, a Muslim majority union territory on the Arabian Sea. So there is a territorial dimension which extends to provinces, but of course also to tracts of land. And the clearest example is, of course, what happened in Ayodhya, but also demands that are made in Mathura and Kashi. We also have there is in Assam, one hears terms like land jihad, and one hears of the ways in which there are contests over territories at the very local level. So right from the national to the local level, you have these the territorial dimension of India's emerging ethnocracy. That's very, very clear. You have a pervasive ethno-nationalism, which is the second aspect of an ethnocracy. And of course, we've already heard about the campaigns for cow protection, the campaigns for love jihad, or rather the campaigns against alleged love jihad, the amendments to citizenship, which very clearly introduce a religious filter to the conferring of citizenship by the Indian state. The protests around the amendments and the ensuing violence in Delhi, which was very clearly targeted by the state apparatus against a specific group. And I don't need to repeat the contentions over the temple to Ram. The third aspect of an ethnocracy is the political economic exclusion of Muslims. And here we have to face the fact that the political economic exclusion of Muslims did not start in 2014. It has been in the making for several decades before that. And there are a lot of competent scholars who've explained why that might be the case. But what has definitely happened is, whereas in the past, at least lip service was paid to the inclusion of Muslims, even though in fact that was not the case, but you had policies at least that were framed that claimed to include Muslims. You had Dr. Manmohan Singh's famous or notorious, take your pick, remark about how Muslims had first right over the nation's resources. However rhetorical they might have been, the point is that previous governments at least paid lip service to including Muslims, which is not something you see after 2014. So this, of course, these three elements make up an ethnocracy. Now, what the conception of ethnocracy does is to expose a peculiar paradox in India. And the paradox is this. On the one hand, of course, you have the introduction of Hindu idioms into public life, into territorial life, and you could say it's a communalization of Indian politics. But also at the same time, and I think this is a bit, I'm still thinking about this, and it's an idea that has been made from time to time, but I think it needs more attention. What you also see is the creation of a Hindu people paradoxically secularizes Hinduism. So whereas Hinduism is a myriad bunch of ideas, of practices, of cults, of creeds, or whatever you would say, the creation of a Hindu ethnos in some ways tries to rub over those internal distinctions. I'm not trying to suggest here that, Hinduism good, Hindutva bad. I don't think that is a very helpful dichotomy to draw. But Hinduism is not Hindutva, of course. Hinduism has numerous internal diversities, which the idea of the Hindus as an ethnos, obviously tries to paper over. All internal distinctions are sought to be raised. And you can see why this appeals. Thank you, Harsh. You can see why this appeals to people who have historically been marginalized, discriminated, oppressed within Hinduism because of the caste hierarchies within Hinduism. Now, whether the Hindu ethnocracy will in fact restore equality or make all Hindus equal is a question that we can only sort of see, and I don't see that happening. But there is a promise of equality which the Hindu ethnocracy offers to Hindus across the board. And the previous presentation has already sort of indicated how the BJP's outreach among groups that were marginalized by Hinduism may actually be showing success. So an ethnocracy has taken root in India. A Hindu ethnocracy has taken root in India. The RSS, which is the BJP's wellspring, ideological wellspring, does believe that Hindu culture is the life breath of India. It has neither repudiated nor distanced itself from statements of previous leaders who regarded Muslims and Christians as culturally alien. We've seen the ways in which the conflict between Hindus and Muslims have intensified since the BJP took power in 2014, illustrated by the incidences of mob lynching, the introduction of the CAA, and the rioting in Delhi, among several other actions. So this rigid ethno-nationalism that is rooted in Hindutva is unmistakable. One final comment about what this means for democracy in India. And while a polity that systematically excludes populations from its governance is cannot reasonably called a democracy, India's ethnocracy is unlikely to be accompanied by a formal suspension of democracy. So it's not likely to be an emergency era sort of situation where democracy was formally suspended. Prime Minister Modi does not tire of proclaiming India's democratic heritage, unlike, say, interwar European demagogues who pointedly repeated democracy. The Prime Minister has gone on to extol India as the mother of all democracies. And it's unlikely that his utterances are strategically oriented towards Western audiences. These are very clearly directed at domestic audiences. The BJP has also respected the mandate of provincial elections that they have lost since 2019. And Modi declares himself at the service of his people rather than proclaiming himself as the equivalent of a Führer or Deus. He is a committed cadre of the RSS and is accountable to the RSS's Hindutva agenda. So there are checks and balances that work within the government. And these checks and balances are likely to prevent even as charismatic a leader as Modi from assuming absolute power. So the future is extremely uncertain because of this tussle within the BJP and between its different sort of ways of thinking about what the future of India is. But a Hindu ethnocracy has taken root, especially if you see the ways in which non-BJP parties have now started to appeal to Hindu sentiments in a way that was not something we saw earlier. Whether it's Mamata Banerjee in West Bengal, whether it's Arvind Kejriwal in Delhi, whether it's the contending parties in Uttar Pradesh, you do see an appeal to Hindu identity. The Hindu people has taken root. And I think that is the longer term legacy of the last several years that we will have to live with. I'll close there, but thank you so much for giving me this chance, Harsh, and everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you're absolutely right that coming back to back with Stuti and Zahid's presentation, we got a fuller picture. There's still a lot of questions, which I hope we'll have just a little time for. I now call upon Sheetal actually to talk precisely about the contradictions in this process of the idea of a unified, homogenized Hindu order, which does nothing actually to obliterate caste hierarchies and inequalities. Sheetal, Dinkar, Asha, Kamble, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. She'll speak about citizenship conundrum of the exterior castes during inverted commas crisis and during normalcy. Over to you, Sheetal. Do just keep looking at the time. If you both stay with time, we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes to discuss. Otherwise, we'll probably just have to keep our questions to ourselves. Sheetal, over to you.
We can't hear you, Sheetal. Could you unmute yourself?
Hello, Sheetal.
Hello, Sheetal. Sorry, we can't still hear you. Maybe if you take off your mic, it might headphone, it might work.
Now I'm audible?
Yeah, now you're audible.
Yes, thank you so much.
In the many mysteries of how IT works, this is one of the tricks.
Okay. Before I start my presentation, just giving a brief idea about my work. I'm Dr. Sheetal Kamble, recently completed my PhD from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. I belong to the Dalit community. I'm the witness of lots of caste-based violence and religious practices, anti-abolitive practices. So this paper is basically all about the reflections of my community. And I would like to share some more stories and some of the narratives, which is more important to understand what is exactly the exterior caste and who is the part of the exterior caste system in India. Basically, I start with my presentation with the idea about Ambedkar's idea about the caste system. And the exterior caste means who is exterior caste means this is the Dalit. Why the Dalit? Because they are ex-untouchables. And what is the connection between the untouchability and the citizenship? So we know that before pandemic, there was it was in newspapers and everywhere. The media is talking about the NRC, CA, Citizenship Act. What is exactly this act is talking about? And the government is very rigid about that. They are unconstitutional values that they're following, and also they are saying that this is the secular agenda for every citizen of India, and practically it is an unconstitutional and is anti-Muslim law. Mostly people are thinking that this unconstitutional laws and this is only for affecting the Muslim community. But I looking as very critically on the citizenship of India, I must say that the status of citizenship of marginalized section of the society has not changed. Means what exactly? The Dalit are facing the same citizen as they are not considered as a citizen of India. So my work start within a lockdown situation where already was people are talking about the migrant workers, and people are saying that the migrant workers doesn't have a caste. I said yes, they have a caste because they belong to the caste community, they belong to the Dalit community, and they are contributing a lot of things in the Indian economy, but they are not protected, and their human values, they are as not considered as a human being. Recently, I collected the most of the stories from the untouchabilities. What is exactly the untouchability? Mostly people are thinking that the Untouchabilities Oblige Act is the section 17 is talking about that, but it does not exist. But I belong to the rural community, so I know that the untouchability is still practice, and it is a visible practices. So what is a visible practices? This practices is that to maintain the Varna system. This government are morely problematic for the Dalit community basically because it is more rigid towards the Hindutva, Hindu Shastra. This is basically is my native place in Maharashtra. This is the propaganda is all about is that Hindu Shastra. What is a Hindu Shastra? The Shastra is the Varna system, and this Varna system is already is normal system in India. It is a homogeneous system which is not collecting as connected with the Dalit community. So what is an untouchability? There is no freedom for the social mobility for the particular Dalit community, but they are a servant. They are voting bank for the all government agenda, as is every government is saying that the Dalit is only the voting bank. In the fascist government, we face a lot of brutalities problem and the caste-based violence. My whole PhD is based on the caste-based violence, and we are looking at the different stories about the Dalit, and particularly Dalit woman. She is a more vulnerable in this situation. What happened with them? The first thing is what it is during the pandemic. Everybody knows that workers were stuck in their place. There is no food for them, and they are asking for the rights. PDS systems, it's a public distribution system, is providing the rations to the marginalized community, particularly Dalit in the village. But what is the narratives come from the people of Dalit community, my community? They are saying that they don't have the Aadhaar card. Aadhaar card means the unique identification card, which is they are not a part of this country. Another thing is they don't have the bank account. Another thing is they don't have a ration card. So look at the different kind of things, which is very important to understand. The Dalit cannot protect themselves as a citizen. So how the citizenship and NRC, their people, and even the fascist government imposing that we are in secular in our country. Another very important narratives come from the Dalit community, which is the mostly I engage with the many unorganized sector because the 90% people, Dalit people, are engaged in the unorganized sector, domestic worker, construction workers, everywhere across the India. I'm not talking a particular of the state of Maharashtra. Across the India, they're engaged, and they are working for the livelihood. Mostly people are thinking awards and writing about that the only government facility, providing government facility is very important for the marginalized section. But apart from that, there is some reason we need to understand are they are secure in this place? Are they are protected in this place? No. So what happened in the spaces of dominant spaces, how they created and created the subjugating, discriminating the Dalit community. Recently, there is a disaster and caste. There are the different relationship with the citizenship. Recently, 2018, that is example of the Kerala flood. Everybody's talking about the Kerala flood and the people are giving the donations and everything is what happened. But what happened with the Dalit community? There was an incident where I interact with the people that is Dalit community facing a lot of problem because they cook food which the people is not agree to eat the food which is cooked by the Dalit community because they are impure and dirty. So look at the same situation happen with the COVID situation where Dalit people is not ready, even Dalit are cooking for the quarantine center for the food. They are beaten up because they cannot cook because they are impure and dirty. So this is the mindset and caste behavior is particularly hemorrhaging, and every time they're realizing you are not a part of this society, you are not part of this country. So citizen, we are never be considered as a citizen. How we are looking at the Citizenship Act and how is a fascist government, how they are playing the game with the particularly society. Another important stories has come up with that is atrocity has continuously increased during the pandemic. Even the Hathras case was a significant, I'm not saying that it's a significant case, but it was a very horrible case where we are trying to interact with the many stakeholders. And then we realize that if the state is biased about the Dalit and even the state is more rigid toward the Hindutva agenda, they wanted to follow the Varna system. How can you look at the other stakeholder will be give a positive response for the Dalit community? In Hathras case, before that also in 2014 to 2019, almost atrocity cases increases. Even during the pandemics, we are filed too many cases in atrocities, but the narrative was very problematic because police are saying that it is a dispute matter, it is not a caste matter. So these are things that the PDF services, which is the public distribution services, one Dalit woman wanted to ask the rights for the rations, she beaten up because she is not a part of this village. And how can she ask the right? So this is the important things clearly mentioned that are they third grade citizen of India or are they a citizen? This is another important stories come up with the very crucial thing is in the Hathras where mostly BJP government and mostly Dharma Shastra and Dharma protected communities come together and insist on that the doing a rape of Dalit community is not being considered as a violence. So why it is happened? Even Hathras, we are interact with many dominant people in Uttar Pradesh. They hostile us and they said that it is cannot be happen because it is not a matter of rape, but the Dalit is not a matter for the village. So this is the whole narratives are clearly defining the citizenship of Dalit. Another important, the exterior caste, we are the ex-untouchables before the constitution. After the constitution, we are not we are an equal citizen. We have to be enjoy as a human being. We have right to equality before law, but this is amendment and this is the provision is only on the papers, not in the reality. Another important aspect of this is the caste settlement. Mostly I'm critically looking at citizenship in the rural, also in the urban. Mostly people think the urban is there is no untouchability and there is no caste system. I must say there is a very different, you have to look at the slum and go, because you will find out the mostly Dalit communities are residing in the slum areas. Why it is? Because it is a segregation. It's a partial settlement. It is a careful settlement for the society, particularly Hindu society, where they can be provide it as only a servant. So mostly in the caste settlement and the critically analysis of the citizenship is giving the idea about the maintaining the caste system is the BJP agenda. And it is the BJP agenda, and this is a propaganda of this society that people should understand what has happened with the marginalized sections of Dalit who are outside of the caste system, those who are outside of the village. Lastly, I wanted to clear over here that I'm not saying that this situation is mostly people are saying that this situation happened before this government also. I'm saying yes, but this government is more rigid towards the every aspect of caste reality, because they are in villages still they are following the Varna system and very, very rigid system, where is no space for the equality. And that is the important aspect of the citizenship. Even in RC and the CIA is coming to the force, people are supporting, even the Dalit community is supporting to this Muslim is solidarity, showing the solidarity with the Muslim. That time people realize in Mumbai, this is the very crucial example and is a crucial issue. Lastly, I wanted to mention over here, I'm just reflecting my work, but one thing I wanted to mention over here is Modi government. Unconstitutional laws is coming force, and nobody's, and this also there is restrictions for the Dalit movement, because Dalit cannot agitate, Dalit cannot be organized, and Dalit cannot be organized the protests. And everything we face during the pandemic, when we asked the rights for the migrant worker, we asked the right for the caste-based violence, for the Hathras case, and even the PDS systems, which is not in supportive for the Dalit community. So these are three aspects. We try to connect with the citizens, so-called citizen, where the Dalit are not protect themselves as a citizen. So this is the citizenship. It is the external cards as a normal. And this situation, and I mostly say that caste-based violence is the legitimized violence according to the Hindu Shastra. So they cannot mention over here that okay, this is the violence and they were not to be interfere in this violence, because it is a legitimized violence, and that violence is day by day increasing across India. I'm not talking about only Maharashtra. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to express my words and my work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sheetal. That was really valuable. I think a very stark and significant reminder that caste, as it has operated for millennia in modern independent India, denies people of disadvantaged caste to access citizenship in any real way. And the manifestation of caste violence in particular comes in the way. We have one more speaker to whom we are looking forward to hearing. Devangan Kuntia from Sharda University in India. He'll talk about contesting cultural citizenship and political citizenship in the context particularly of the Paroja tribe. We look forward to hearing you, Devangan, Devanjan. My apologies that we are reaching the end of the session. Finish in 10 minutes. We'll have just about 5-7 minutes for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Harsh Mander, and it's an honor that you are chairing the session. And about me, like I've done my MPhil and PhD from JNU, Delhi, and after that, like I'm currently teaching at Sharda University, and at this moment I'm teaching a course, Sociology of the Margins. So in that context, like, and also I have like, I belong to the state of Odisha of eastern part of India. So where, the tribal community is very strong. So, however, so let me start with, quickly start with introducing what I'm going to talk about. So basically, it's contesting cultural citizenship and political citizenship, a study of Paroja tribe. So basically, I'm trying to look at the differentiation between how people perceive cultural citizenship as well as political citizenship. The 2019 amendment to the citizenship laws of India has been based on the ideological framework of othering, that is categorizing people as a misfit within the norms of socio-cultural mainstream group. Although Citizenship Amendment Act 2019 has been critiqued majorly for religious exclusionary nature, but its other dimensions in context of traditionally marginalized groups like scheduled tribes has been missing. This empirical research paper, so I focus on contestations between social identity and citizenship as a process of everydayness among the tribal community of Paroja tribe in Assam state of India. This tribal community historically resides in the state of Odisha. However, over the past couple of centuries, part of the community has migrated to the neighboring states of Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, West Bengal, and Assam. Although in Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh, as well as in Maharashtra, the Paroja community has been recognized as the scheduled tribe. However, they are not recognized in the state of West Bengal and Assam as scheduled tribe. The term Paroja, interestingly, is a local Odia term which is derived from Sanskrit word praja, which literally means citizens. So the migrated community of Paroja in the state of West Bengal and Assam have been marginalized by losing their socio-historical tribal identity and corresponding tribal citizenship of their community. But a part of community Sana Praja have been subject to further exclusion, especially during the NRC process in Assam, due to their traditional inclusion of beef in their dietary practices, which is closely related as, in quotes, non-Indian, thus foreign in nature. This ethnographic study, therefore, underlines how Paroja community contests losing their cultural citizenship, that is the tribal identity, and political citizenship in their everyday life. Now, how does state define citizenship? State-defined definition accounts of formal legal citizenship abound in reports and academic texts on citizenship. State laws on citizenship is primarily about attachments of rights and duties to an individual that are subject to arrival, entry, and settlement in the country. So this is I have used of Prabhat. She had published in 2018. This definition is very important. Individuals are subject to arrival, entry, and settlement in the country. On that basis, the legal understanding of citizenship. Now, do former citizens, in the sense like, I'm talking in context of those people who have been kept out of the citizenship now in Assam. So, and that includes the many of the tribal groups that I had interviewed. Now, do former citizens who have undergone the process of becoming an individual applicant, so they were not, they were a natural citizen earlier, now they have become, because of this process, an individual applicant. So do they conceive citizenship in the same manner of this definition, or how the government or how the journalists have been defining or understanding citizenship? And especially when it comes to, so how do they describe citizenship, its processes and parameters, basically? Especially when it comes to Paroja tribe, who have been residing in Assam for over 150 years, are made to file for their citizenship. This paper evaluates how the process of NRC led to T tribes, especially Paroja tribe, revisit their forefathers' arrival, entry, and settlement in a country of India. So, and of course, like they have to, understand that 150 years of that time their forefathers have spent in the state of Assam. So what was that? That was the question. Now, to what extent their portrayal match with the accounts, state accounts or explanations written by scholars, journalists over citizenship. the natural parameter of citizenship of India that dominated the daily discourse and social narratives among the Paroja tribe during the NRC process. So when I went to, so this study basically I conducted in the month of December 2019 and January 2020. After that, I couldn't go because of lockdown restrictions. So, so I'm going to talk about their discourses, what discourses were happening within this tribe, within this tea tribe of Paroja tribe in Assam. Now, during the NRC process, in and around tea estates of Upper Assam region, where the idea was about attaining traditional Assamese identity and Assamese values. And what are those Assamese values? Those are upper caste Hindu cultural elites. That's the reference point, basically. So for them, basically, it was not the legal state definition of citizenship or what the journalists were saying or how we perceive sitting in Delhi, but it was for them, for the tea tribes, the reference point was for them was the upper caste cultural elite of Assam who are residing nearby their tea estates. So Assamese values and Assamese cultural identity. Now this daily discourse led Paroja tribe members to revisit some of these socio-political questions, which were never part of their discourses earlier when they used to meet, within their tribes. Now I'll just read out very quickly what are those questions, very, very important questions, and we will understand how they are trying to understand the meaning of citizenship. So the first question is basically, what is the primary identity of Paroja when they started, filing up for citizenship? Are they cultivators? Are they laborers? Or are they tribals? Now, in case of laborers, if they believe that, yes, they are laborers, does this bind them as a community of tea tribes? And in case of tribals, if they consider them as tribals, does this bind them as a community of workers? This is a very, very big, these identity questions started erupting in their daily discourses. Now, what are the factors that define them as tea laborers if they consider them as laborers? Is it the type of work they do? Is it the type of wages they receive? Is it the type of ownership of material or non-material assets do they have? Or it is their value in the process of production of growing tea, right? But then that contradicts the idea of their association with the tribe, because originally they are tribe, tea tribe, Paroja tribe. Now, what are the factors that define them as tribes? Of course, they have a common language, cultural practices, religious belief system, solidarity among the community members, and social norms. Now, they are confused whether they are tribals first or they are laborers first while undergoing this process. So this whole process is basically what I could understand, the process of tribalization when they are thinking, no, we are the tribes, tribalization to detribalization when they are getting into the idea of, no, you are not tribes, you are workers just, right? Because they are not given ST category. To again, since they are, growing the consciousness of tribal identity. So tribalization, to detribalization to again tribalization. This is the whole idea within this whole network of ideas that, they were trying to find their association with the Assamese identity, because being Assamese identity will prove that they are a citizen of India. A very complex, thing under which they were going through. But now the question is, why these tribes are being denied of being, citizenship? Why officers or authorities are not considering them, or they have put them under the list of non-Indians? Because of the cultural practices. For example, originally they are goat breeders, goat skinning. Yes, I do it. And they are also, apart from doing their work, they are also into the practice of butchering, right? Which is considered as something very, very non-Indian or non-Hinduism, right? because it's closely related with a Muslim community in Assam. Then they also practice cross-cousin marriage within this tribe. Again, this is being considered as something non-Hindu Hindu idea. And along with that, of course, like, many other things, I don't have time to discuss that, but because of their cultural identity and their practices, they are being considered as, non-Indian. And also because of, since they have been, like the colonial masters 150 years back, they had brought them from Odisha to Assam. So the local community, tribal community, is not considering as one of them. They're considered as foreigner. So again, they are losing the political citizenship because of their transportation from another state. And since because of their cultural practices, they are being considered as non-Hindus. And so because of all these, they are in a way in a crossroad, and they are trying to understand that which way should they go. If they go one side, they are going to lose their tribal identity. If they are going to go for the political citizenship, understanding, they are losing their tribal identity, or vice versa, basically. So a very, very complex situation for this particular community. So I stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Devangan. I think that was a very, very thoughtful, insightful description of how once you challenge everybody to prove their citizenship, the Muslim community is deeply burdened by it. But you remind us about how, working class people, tribal communities, migrant communities, there are many overlaps which further complicate the capacity of your proving your equal citizenship. I find that we're close to the end of our time. We can perhaps overrun by just a few minutes. I was looking at the questions. I had a lot of questions, but I think we must give the audience. I'm sure the panelists also have questions. So I was looking at the audience questions. I find that just 2 or 3, so I'll just read them out. And finally, I'll just then request each of the panelists to speak, this time in a disciplined way, for about a minute each, in response to both what you heard from other panelists, but also to these questions from the audience. Seema Khan asks, despite strong criticism on Modi and the Hindutva ideology, what has made him win elections again? Is it strong American support, or India is following the Israeli model to crush all others but the so-called superior ethnicity? Deepika Kamra has a question specifically for Indrajit. Can ethnocracy coexist with procedural democracy? I ask this because the Modi government is building an ethnocracy riding on some notion of electoral legitimacy. Yep, I think Ravi Raman also, as a fellow panelist, wants to seek some clarifications. Ravi, we have very little time, but I could start with you. You could, speak for a minute, and then I'll invite each of the panelists.
Thanks. Thanks, Harsh. Ravi here. Actually, this is in continuation of the questions raised by Seema Khan and Deepika, but I think I could raise it even otherwise as a separate independent question. But before that, let me just make 1 or 2 remarks on other 2 presentations. I haven't heard much about Sheetal speaking on, but at a later stage, I heard her saying something about Kerala. Then I thought that it would be a failure on my part, not to give a clarification. As a member of the state planning board, that is, perhaps Kerala is the best state, in India, which could be treated as an example, in treating the migrant workers, whether it was due to during flood or in the COVID situations, and also, of course, with respect to Dalits, because Kerala is a state, which has become modern in that sense. It always wanted to erase all kinds of spaces of exclusion. So to that extent, we are very serious about the welfare of the marginalized communities. Coming to the point raised by Devananjan, that this binary sort of categorization, the politics versus identity, that's highly problematic, I think. If you treat these two things separately, that's very, very problematic. Because in that process, you are separating ideology and what is called identities. I would make an argument that identity is nothing less than ideology. It is simply political. So this differentiation is highly, is not that meaningful as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, coming to
Ravi, Ravi, we'll really have to move on. Do you have a clear question? I'll just
yes. Just one more point. That's all.
Question, Ravi.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So do you think that you really need to retain this bifurcation? Between what is called politics and identities as separate domains? That's the question. Actually, I have one or two clarifications to Indrajit and yeah. Okay, sorry. Then I will type it and that's fine, I think.
Yeah, no, there's a long day today, so I'm sure we can keep coming back.
Okay.
I'm sorry because I just want.
I do want to
fair to ask each of the panelists to respond to the two questions, to Raman's observations, to what you heard from your other colleagues on the panel, but literally please staying with just 1 minute each.
So can I go first?
Zahid, you have separate 1 minute this time. So.
Okay, so I'll just try to answer Raman's question. So basically, as I have mentioned that, I'm trying to separate, our ideas from what the people who are experiencing it. So basically, when I was trying to talk to the Paroja tribe in Assam, so this is basically what I found that, they are trying to understand the whole process because it's a long process of many years. So this is basically how I tried analyzing that they are trying to understand the political citizenship as something different and also trying to understand the cultural citizenship. So this is not my understanding, this is their understanding. So this is how I tried putting their voices as well. Thank you.
And I think they need to accommodate, and the reality that the question of the recognition of your citizenship is deeply political and ideological. I think they recognize that and they're trying to accommodate their claims within that understanding of reality. So let me then, since Devamin came in, let me go in reverse direction. Sheetal, any quick responses?
Basically, I wanted to say one thing about the Kerala. I'm just talking about the reality of Kerala. People are seeing that it's very progressive state and very literate state as compared to the other state. My observation and my intervention when I was in 2009, when I was conducting the police training with the Thiruvananthapuram, and that time I realized the domestic violence is very high. Why it is high? Because still the dowry system is still exists in the Kerala. So I'm not targeting any state, but I'm looking the whole reality, what is happening. Even you go to the Uttar Pradesh, people say that the quarantine center is very secular because we are inclusive. Yes, we can understand. But what happened with the other communities, which is they are not considered as a part of the society. So I'm saying that in context of the Kerala, mostly people in the every conference, I'm not talking about this conference, the last conference, I wasn't attending that. The people was attacking me that it is a progressive state. How can you say that even the COVID situation, they feel they are work very inclusive form for the migrant worker? Yes, I say that is. But can you say that it is equally treated with each and every person in this state? that is a problematic. Because we have to hear the voices in a different manner. I'm not saying that it is not in that way, but one thing I mentioned that this is my reflections of work. I'm not putting, or I'm not collecting data from the media. I'm not collecting data from the news. I go to the village, I visit the place, I collect the narratives. That is my work. And that is, I try to articulate. Maybe I must be wrong also, but one thing I believe that you must trust on the voices of the marginalized people, whatever it is, but you have to trust. So this is all of my understanding about the state.
No, I think that I knew when Ravi was presenting Kerala as this flawless model state, he was stirring a hornet's nest. I think Kerala has many achievements, but it's the fractures of caste, of gender, and the recent upheaval of communal sentiment runs very deep. And I think we need to recognize, while we recognize what we have accomplished, we need to be introspective about what ground we still need to cover. Indrajit, there was one question specifically directed to you.
Sure, thanks. So there's the question about ethnocracy and whether it can coincide with and coexist with procedural democracy. Absolutely. I think you're correct to say that a lot of the legitimacy that comes from victory in elections. It may also be the case that the central government loses in states, but remains and retains sort of power at the center. And here it's interesting and important to remember that even at the peak of, we've had 2 terms really of the Modi government. Their vote share is still way behind the vote shares that the Congress enjoyed back in the days when they were at the peak. The sort of dominance that the Congress enjoyed, when you had the Congress dominance in India in the first 2 decades, is much more than the kind of dominance that the BJP can hope to enjoy, at least in this term and, in the forthcoming future. But the point is that the BJP sort of, the idea of what they want India to be like, in some ways, is irrespective of other political parties winning or losing. The idea that, India is a Hindu nation has to be appropriated by other political parties. And that in that sense, the idea of the ethnocracy does not really need the BJP in power. So it is absolutely possible for the BJP, for the ethnocracy to, coexist with a procedural democracy. There was a question about, if I may, Harsh, there was a very quick question.
There are a couple of more questions for you.
Yeah, can I just address them as well in half a minute, if that's okay?
If you can, from
absolutely. I think it is often asked, whether the concept of a Hindu ethnocracy contests with linguistic nationalism, with linguistic sort of ideas. My answer is, unfortunately, they can both coexist. You can have a Hindu ethnocracy that sits atop linguistic diversity. The idea of a Hindu ethnocracy is that you construct a Hindu people. I said that you erase divisions between them. I don't mean that you erase physically, language divisions. I don't mean that everyone will start speaking Hindi. But, whether you're Bengali or Tamil or Hindi speaking or Marathi speaking, you sort of take into account the primary identity becomes your Hindu identity. And it looks like, a Hindu ethnocracy may well be able to establish the Hindu identity as the primary overarching identity over all other identities. I think that's what a Hindu ethnocracy seeks to do. I'll stop there and hand back to her.
There is one more question for you, but I hope you can take it up later in the day. Anthea Mato says, again for Indrajit, the notion of ethnocracy is mostly associated with the Pakistani state.
Yeah.
Do you not think that by using this term, you're somehow undermining a more political project?
You might sort of be looking at a Pakistanization of the Indian state, but that's a very quick answer. I don't want to say, one is better than the other, but we can discuss that more.
Okay, friends. So Stuti and then finally Zahid.
All right, thank you. And all the other presentations were excellent, and particularly Sheetal, I learned quite a lot. The question, I think I'll take the question about why, despite criticism, the Modi and Hindutva, they win elections again. I think it's a very, it's a complex question. It'll take a whole day of conference again, but it's a whole mix of things. And I think if this panel has told you anything, is how discourses are being created and manipulative, how narratives around truth and history or identity and ideology are being manipulated and promoted. And behind, I don't think there is American support, but it is resources that the BJP has, whether it is financial resources at its fingertips. I've written a paper on social media and how they have used social media for promoting some of these narratives. And to be able to counter that, I don't think any opposition party still in India is capable of doing. That is one reason why they win. And the other criticism of opposition in India, and you can see it in so-called progressive politics of other politicians, but there is a soft Hindutva kind of emphasis. The Congress does it, Arvind Kejriwal does it. They all kind of try to pander to the same narrative, and that is why no one is really challenging this predominant idea. And over to Zahid.
Okay, Zahid sir.
Thank you very much. I'll be quick. So I think in relation to the second part of Seema's question, so there can be both, geopolitical dynamics due to which India is very important now for the Western world to counter China's rise. So definitely that plays a role in which many of these Western countries that claim to be promoting, Western norms and values and institutions, they are hardly criticizing what's happening in Jammu and Kashmir or northeast of India or, in Assam, and these horrific videos that we keep seeing, coming from India. And that's completely different from when the Western world is talking about Muslims in China, for example. So there are two different worlds. And then the second component could be that, since 9/11, there is this rise of Islamophobia in the West. And also we have seen that how in Asian countries, whether it's China, Myanmar, or now India, perhaps, this Islamophobia, which already existed at the global level, has played some role in these sort of developments in countries like India or Myanmar, because when you see that the Western world is not considered accountable in terms of whatever is happening to religious minorities. There we see, from France, a hijab ban in France to, treatment of Muslims elsewhere. So I think a combination of those factors might have played a role. I won't say that, India is particularly inspired by the Israeli model of, because it's very difficult. We're talking about a country where there are close to 200 million Muslims, and not just like in a place like West Bank, for example. We're talking about whole of India. So the dynamics are very different. So I'll just, stop here before I just give another speech. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think this is a very powerful session, a reminder of complex politics that are emerging in similar and yet diverse ways across the planet, where identities of various kinds, religious identity, racial, ethnic, language, identities are being weaponized for dominance, and as Sheetal reminded us, caste and the development about tribe are being weaponized to dominate, but also probably to successfully divert from the real problems of working people, of jobs, of a decent future. And I think that a humane, inclusive, egalitarian notion of citizenship cannot remain simply an idealistic aspiration. It is perhaps the most pressing demand of our times. So thank you, all of you, and Thank you, Indrajit, and handing over to you for the next steps.
Thank you, Harsh, and thank you on panel members. So I'm happy that despite all sort of technical glitches at the beginning, like we have started really a great day with all excellent papers and presentations. So now it's time to end this thought-provoking session. So thank you once again, Stuti Bhatnagar, Zahid Shahab Ahmed, Indrajit Roy, Sheetal, Dinkar, Asha, Kamble, Devanjan Khutia, and Dr. Mander for moderating the session. It's been a pleasure listening to your interventions, and I'm sure we'll be in touch through our consortium. And a special thanks to all our participants from different countries, from Australia, Sri Lanka, India, Germany, and the UK. As you know, we have some excellent sessions lined up, so please be with us. We will start our next session at 11 a.m. UK time. And before the second session, we will just play a short video. Please stay with us. And once again, thank you all. Let's be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.